So when you pay attention to your story, you have the opportunity to improve it. And I think about it a lot like the idea of writing a story, right? Is that you can write the first draft and see how it turns out, and paying attention to, I think there's a challenge that arises, and many people, including myself at times, fall into, and that's trying to both create the story and edit the story at the same time, right? And
Me too.
and, and it's challenging to be mindful. I think it's important to be mindful of what's going on, but there's a kind of an Ecclesiastes type of refrain in that there's a time to create and there's a time to edit. There's a time to, you know, do, and there's a time to pay attention to what you're doing, right?
Hmm. There's that story about the guy that charged $10,000 um, for hitting a spot with a hammer. Do you remember
Right.
that story?
Yes.
And the guy said, "What do you mean $10,000? It took you 2 seconds. All you did was tap it with a hammer." And he said, "Yeah, it was $5 for the hammer and $9,995 for knowing exactly how to hit it and where to hit it."
Right.
So
I'm
he put that
reminded
much
of
thought in it. He put that much thought into it. And it's the fact that he knew what to think about and what to analyze and figure out.
a
That's what he
lifetime of
got paid for.
experience. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's kind of honestly like watching an artist at work. You can watch someone who's a very skilled artist doing
Mhm.
a portrait or, a landscape or whatever they may be doing. And because they have invested all this time into developing that skill, it looks effortless. But yet it's kind of like watching Bob Ross on, the videos that
His name keeps coming up in my life.
we had an experience where I was with the youth group at church, and we all had canvases and paint, and we
Mhm.
watched the Bob Ross video, all expecting to be able to do exactly what Bob Ross had done. And he talked the way he talks about it, it makes it seem like it's so easy to do. You just
Right.
throw some paint on here and you do this, you do a little
You
dab here,
dab a little there and scrunch a little there. And yes.
and it comes out beautiful. See? And we turn our canvas around and it's like, no,
Like a bunch of 5-year-olds did it.
but it's so easy. Au contraire. But I think we do that a lot in life, right? We
Mhm.
are like, we saw them do it and they made it look so easy. Why isn't it easy for us? Why can't I hit the one spot with the hammer and,
And make
solve
$10,000
the
doing
problem?
it.
Yeah, and make my $10,000.
Right. I
It's
think
because,
for me, I think it helps. What has literally changed my life is knowing that it's all a story.
mm,
I see life as a game, and I'm just here kind of living this existence, and my job is to love it. My
mm,
job is to just love whatever I'm doing. That's my job. Period. If I'm not loving it, something's changing soon.
right.
So in order to make sure that something changes soon, I try to focus on what I love, and I try to keep my eyes off of what I'm not loving so much.
And how do you deal with, because I think there's some value in both appreciating, being grateful for what it is that you do love.
Hmm.
And I was preparing for today's conversation. I was thinking about, there are things that we can be grateful for because they're in our lives, right? That
Hmm.
I'm grateful to be doing this podcast. I'm grateful, that we have electricity so that the
We
the
have
cloudy
internet.
skies outside,
Yeah, and we have internet.
and
We
we
have
have
internet. We
internet.
have
We have
friends all over the world because of the internet.
absolutely. So there are many things that I'm grateful for their presence in my life. And then there are things that I'm grateful that are absent from my life now,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
I'm
Good point.
grateful that they're gone and done with, right?
Yes.
And I think it's valuable to look at both of those things, right? To say, okay, well, what are the things that I want to increase? And when I was recovering from my struggle with depression, I looked at it and I had learned eventually to look for the energy zappers, meaning the energy drainers, and the energy boosters, right?
I like
What
the way you
thing
put that. Mhm.
what things boosted my energy and what things drained my energy. And by paying attention to those things, noticing what were boosters and what were drainers, then I could make appropriate changes, right? That I would reduce the amount of draining that was happening in my life and
Mhm.
increase the amount of boosting that was happening in my life. And by doing so, I moved from honestly really depressed and frustrated with life and not very happy to really loving the life that I'm living.
That's huge. I love to hear recovery stories, honestly. I do. I think for me, it's the transformation is what I love to get to know about. Um, the point where, like what was it that like just snapped you into, snapped you back to this reality, a reality that you like, that you can handle, that you enjoy living, as opposed to what it was before. A reality that you dreaded every day, that kind of stuff.
Right. And for me, it wasn't, there was no,
There wasn't
sudden,
just a snap of the fingers where it just
there was no
switched over.
magical weekend that I, went to a retreat and, my life is instantly better. You know,
Okay.
there was no one book that I read that like, oh my gosh, my life has changed. Although there were many weekends and many books and many conversations and many writing sessions where many little things accumulated in order to make a big difference. So it wasn't
Mhm.
like one big thing that changed everything. It was many, many very small things that changed the course of my experience of my life.
Okay. So it's a matter of changing perspective. So I guess what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to figure out for myself even, like when the switch was. Like
Mm,
I have it kind of narrowed down to a time frame, but then stuff comes up in my memories where I'm like, okay, maybe it was sooner than that. I don't know. I don't understand. Maybe it was sooner than that, or maybe it was later than that. Maybe I wasn't quite as far along as I think I was at that point.
sure.
I don't know.
So I
So,
can speak to that a little bit. There's like the turning point in the story, right? The
mhm,
in a,
exactly.
in a way the climax of the story. And for me, and this was like really, really simple, but really profound, in that I remember sitting in bed one morning and I was just feeling really down because I was feeling really down
Yeah.
and feeling down about being down. And I realized, you know what? I can just, I don't have to feel down about the fact that I'm feeling down. I can just accept the fact that I'm feeling down, and not fight it, just accept it as it is. And by accepting it, that not only allowed more space for me to just be with it. In the meditation that I did this morning, it was likened to taking like a teaspoon of red dye and pouring it into your water cup. And
Mhm.
it would make a pretty dramatic change in that water cup, as opposed to taking that teaspoon and pouring it into a lake or
Oh,
the ocean or something, and that one teaspoon isn't going to make much difference.
right.
And by being more mindful, by being more practicing mindfulness, it gives us more space for that.
It's more concentrated. Our efforts seem more concentrated, I think.
Well, and it's kind of both ways. As I'm saying this, I'm realizing he was the guide that was leading the meditation, who was Jack Canfield, by the way.
Okay.
He he was making the point that meditation gives us more space. It would be like, we when we're in pain, it's kind of like, oh, that's all we can see. It's like holding the little pebble, up to your eye, and because it's so close and that's all you can see is that pebble, it consumes, fills up your all your vision. But
Hmm.
if you hold it away from you, if you pull it away from you, then you can see that it's just a small pebble, right?
Right.
And so he was making the point that through meditation and mindful practices, we can, it's like taking that red dye and putting it into the lake of consciousness rather than the uh, close-up view of the dye in our water cup, right? And so it gives us more space. But also I'm seeing, as in to regards to your comment, it also works the other way, in which mindfulness also helps us to see more clearly what was kind of diffuse
Hmm.
earlier, that we can notice things that we hadn't been paying attention to because they were lost in the muddle of life, right?
I think each drop of water, if we are each a drop of water, there's the glass of water, which is just us and whoever touches our life directly, versus pouring it into a lake where it's, what impact am I having on the entire world?
Mm,
Um, like these things that I'm stressing about right now, um, the fact that I'm stressing about it, what good is that doing for the big picture? Stressing about like these things that among the whole world stressing about it. How many other people are stressing about this? Is this really going to matter in a year, or in 5 years, 10 years, whatever? Is this really going to matter? When I think about the things that I used to stress about, and now I'm just like, oh my god, and like I'm forever saying how dramatic I was when I was younger. Everything was such a big deal. So everything was, watching my life was like watching a soap opera.
right. Well, I'm reminded of a joke that I think it was Drew Carey shared, and he talks about, oh, so you don't like your job, your job is making you miserable. Well, there's a group of people that feel similarly. It's called everybody.
It's kind of like a get over yourself comment.
Right. But the truth of the matter, so there's that kind of truth, or that perspective of it, that that we all struggle, we all have moments in our work, in our days, in our lives, when we're feeling uncomfortable. But I think there is value in recognizing, stopping and seeing, the dye in our water glass,
Hmm.
and seeing it more clearly, so that we can start doing something about it, right? That we can,
Hmm.
either drain the water glass, or fill it up with something else, or give it to somebody that likes red colored water better than you do, or whatever. But there are choices that we can make by
Right.
recognizing that things aren't the way that we expected them to be, right? By paying attention to them. And one of the things that I have discovered in looking for work that was more fulfilling for me, is that it doesn't just benefit me, it benefits all those people whose lives I touch, right?
Hmm.
Whether that's through directly through the work that I'm doing, or it's indirectly just because I'm a happier person, and more enjoyable to be around.
Yeah. I had a conversation yesterday with a woman who, one of our residents is in, um, she's health wise, she's not doing too hot, or so she's told by the doctors.
Mm,
Well, about two and a half, I think it was about 2.5 years ago, she was told she's got like a few months to live.
2.5 years ago.
2.5, maybe 3 years ago.
Okay.
She was told she has just a few months to live. Well, um, so she's still here, Now she's having a bit of a hard time. She's her daughter told me that she thinks she's in the beginning stages of kidney failure.
Mm,
So um, I was talking with her daughter um, yesterday, and I was asking how, how are they getting along these days? Because her daughter's been staying with her, just to, you know, um, anyway. So I asked how they've been getting along and, stuff like that. It's a mom and daughter. And I know they've had struggles in the past, just like any mom and daughter, you know. She told me that they went for years where they didn't talk.
mm,
Um, and she said, because she said now they talk because mom is more humble and mom and all this stuff. And I can relate, and I can relate to both sides. I can relate to being the mom part and the daughter part.
mm,
Um, but they're in a good place. Both of them, at least. They're both in a good place. The resident I'm talking about, she's ready. She's, she has lived a wonderful life. She's told me about some of her stories. She told me about some of her adventures. She's got tons of friends. She's made a huge impact in the world. She feels good about herself. She feels good about her life. She's made peace with everything. She's ready.
mm.
But in the meantime, she's loving every moment that she gets to spend with her daughter, and her friends keep visiting her and stuff like that. Um, and in the meantime, her daughter is also they have an open they have there have been they've openly communicated about everything that they could possibly need to in this
Mm,
situation, and they're just at peace.
mm.
Both of them, they're just in the meantime, they're just enjoying whatever it is. And I think that's an important part of for this conversation, is just being mindful of where you're at right now,
Yes.
where you've been, where you're going, but what's most important is where you are right now. Are you dreading are you busy fearing what's coming up, or, um, ruminating about the past? Are you busy concentrate? Are you spending every moment right now doing that, living in the past and living in the future? Or are you paying attention to what's going on right now?
Right.
Right now, you've got people around you that love you, people that, you know, are making sure that that they're at peace also, to make sure that, just people that are important to you. Just it's a transition from one life to the next, from one existence to the next.
Yes. And I'm reminded of a story I frequently share with regards to this, and that is, gosh, it was approaching 10 years ago, and my oldest son was finishing up his Eagle Scout, and he was working on his hiking merit badge, and so we were hiking along the Blue Ridge Parkway here in North Carolina, and there are some challenging hikes along there. And at the time, he was in much better shape than I was. He would just get on a 10-mile hike and just go and just hardly stop. And I, not being as in good a shape, would need to stop more frequently.
Hmm.
And I remember one time just stopping on this kind of this rocky area, and he just zoomed ahead, and I went out to the ledge, kind of the ridge of the mountain that we were on, and just saw this incredible view. There was a waterfall on the other side of the valley. There was, a valley, and it was probably summertime, and, just really lush green forest there. And I realized, that just by stopping and paying attention to where I was, rather than being so headstrong and set on completing the 10-mile hike, that I was able to notice just how much beauty there was right there in that moment.
Along the way.
Right.
Yeah.
I could have been focusing on, my feet are so sore, and, I really wish I were in better shape, or whatever. But
Hmm.
instead, I just noticed and took in the beauty of where I was on the journey. And that has just really stuck with me. and it's played out in different areas of my life, just what is the beauty that I can see right
Hmm.
now in this moment, right? That it doesn't have to be, like you're talking about, you know, one of the residents you're caring for approaching the end of her life, which probably for most people is, you wouldn't think there would be much beauty in that. I mean, it'd
Right.
be more sad and tear jerking and so forth.
Hmm.
And I'm remembering also, sitting with my mom and her last literal last day of life, and she was just cutting up like all the time, in other words, making everybody around her laugh, uh, in her final hours. That was where she was putting her energy, was in making the doctors and the nurses and her children and everybody just really enjoying and appreciating the moment. And here she was, all her organs are starting to shut down. She knows she's only got a very short period of time, like very short period of time, and she's just creating a really magical moment for everybody. It's just one of the things that's kind of a hallmark for me of my relationship with her, was just creating joy in the moment. And
She wanted to leave this world making other people. She didn't want to leave this world with other people like just, oh, oh, poor, the poor lady, she didn't make it another day or whatever.
right.
We wanted to leave this world with, making people feel good and laughing and all that that's awesome. That sounds peaceful.
Yeah,
Probably didn't feel like it for you at the time though.
well, it was kind of a weird moment, right? I mean, it was literally bittersweet because
Yeah.
I was laughing along with everybody else, just enjoying being there with mom. And you know
Now, did you feel bad because you were laughing? Or did
no,
you, or like after she passed, did you feel bad that you were laughing for the last few hours or whatever?
no, not at all.
Oh, that's cool. That's wonderful because I know a lot of people who would. If you think
Yeah,
about it, a lot of people would be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe we've been laughing this whole time and it's such a serious moment and seriously, too
well,
serious. Get over it. It's just
right.
at
Well,
peace
that was kind
now."
of her point, actually. In fact, she
Yeah. I love
told
that.
that day, as she had many times before, never grow up,
Mhm.
never stop enjoying the life that you've got, you know. And she's had certainly had her struggles. Life didn't turn out the way she expected.
Right.
She didn't do the traveling she would have liked to have done, and there were lots of things that she wished had been different.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's like, we can spend all our time bemoaning what we didn't do, or we can appreciate the moment that we have right now. We can have our focus on out there, either in the future, what we would have liked to have done that we didn't do, or on the past, on what we did do that we wish we hadn't done, or we
Mhm.
can appreciate this is the moment that we have right now. How can we make the most of it?
Right. Um, there is a Rascal Flatts song that makes me think of my dad all the time. Let me see if I can. Um, it's a particular song. Oh, I'm moving on.
Mm,
That's the name of the song. Is I'm moving on.
okay.
That song makes me cry every single time. Every single time. My dad's been gone for 20 years now,
Mm,
but that song talks about and it's probably I don't think that song is intended to talk about death. I think it's talking about at the end of a relationship.
mhm,
But when I hear it talking about how my dad has um, not everybody always liked him. He's been through times and he knew later on he knew why people didn't like him earlier on.
mm,
He understood it later on. Um, and I think that's what helped me make peace with him. It helped us. Um, but that song, if you get a chance to listen to it, it's by Rascal Flatts. It's called "I'm Moving On." Um, anyway, I can't think of the lyrics now, but that's the song is about I'm moving on from where I was to where I need to be.
mm.
Um, and can't think of what
Okay.
else to say about the song. But anyway, I'm recommending it.
And I can see the tears welling up in your eyes right now as you're talking about it, which is interesting, right? I mean, you normally think of tears as being like, I tear up a lot. You know, show me a Hallmark commercial or something,
I'm like that too.
tearing up, and it's like, I'm a guy. I'm not supposed to feel like this. This is, I'm just rubbing my eyes. I'm not. There are no tears here. But it's really interesting, how healing those tears can be, right?
Hmm.
That there's a song that means a lot to Martha and me, that the reason it really resonates with us because it reminds us of the time when we separated, and
Oh.
she moved across country from where I was living. And our relationship could have come to an end at that point, but it didn't. And because of it didn't, it's stronger than ever now. And again, it's kind of like the idea of paying attention to where you're at right now. You can look at and see all the things that are going wrong, all the frustration you have with the other person, whether it be your dad or your mom or your wife or your husband or whoever. Or you can look and see, what are the things that I really appreciate about this moment, this
Hmm.
time, this person, or myself, right?
The way that I tell people that I'm living in my heaven is that's what I tell people. People when we get on the subject of heaven and hell, I'm currently living in my heaven is
Mm.
the way I see it. I've been through my hell. I've been through my share of my hell.
Mm.
Um, but currently I'm living in my heaven. And that's not to say my life is perfect. Not by any means. I'm still working on it, but it's what I make of the things that aren't so easy. It's what I do with those times. Uh,
And I
for
can relate to
example,
that. Having gone through my own hell, I haven't really
mhm,
thought of my life as being a heaven, although I'm often do say that, I'm in contrast to where I was, I
mhm.
have to pinch myself because it's like, I, I can't believe that life is
Well,
as
I think about that during the time that you were separated, as I can only imagine the heartache that you were going through at the time, both of you, that had to be a moment in your hell.
yeah,
And at the time you didn't even recognize it.
yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely felt that way. I remember writing
Right.
letters, and I was like literally pen and paper writing letters to my family, and
Right.
tears streaming down my face and
Mhm.
messing up the ink on the paper and so forth. And I mean, it did not feel like heaven at the time. That's for sure.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly my point, I think. And I think the whole point to this conversation is that you write your own story.
Hmm.
And the fact that I can see each moment, like before we got on started recording, we were talking about how um, you asked what's new and exciting in my life. And I said, I'm excited that I think this opportunity is, I think this chapter is coming to a close,
Meaning your
um,
work, right?
meaning my work, or my employer work, not
Right.
the life coaching, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That I've never let go of, even though I'm supposed to identify myself as a manager here.
Hmm.
That's when someone asks my occupation, I'm supposed to say I'm a manager here at this community,
Hmm.
but I don't see myself that way. This is just a temporary. This is a chapter. That's what this is. This is a chapter. That's not who I am.
This is a spot on the journey. This is.
Exactly. And right now I'm excited about the fact that um, I feel like this chapter is coming to a close because I feel like things are wrapping up and kind of moving along, moving in the direction of we're exploring new opportunities, we're seeing what's next, we're, that kind of stuff. Um, and things are moving along in the right direction. So I'm excited about that.
Mm,
In the meantime, I get through each day. I appreciate each segment for what it for what I can. My work days or whatever. So I make the most of it. I do what I can. So
yes. So I think that we're coming to a close of this conversation, but I'm struck by three things. One, the idea of laughing when you're dying,
mhm,
finding joy when you're crying, and also just, really appreciating where we're at this spot on the journey.
mhm,
Whether we're laughing, crying, or somewhere in between, and that there's beauty to be found in each step of the journey if we
mhm.
just pay attention to where we're at. Notice the beauty that's around us.
When I go to make a decision, someone asked me recently how what's the best way to make important decisions. For me, um, I have noticed that one big question that I ask myself is, will I what could I possibly regret in the
Mm,
future? Is there anything that I'm considering doing that later on I might regret?
mm,
And usually I have found from my own experience and people that I've talked to, um, that most of the regrets are things that we didn't
mhm,
do, things that we didn't opportunities that we didn't take advantage of, things we didn't explore, that kind of stuff. So I try to live with that in mind. Um, and the only thing that I want to, for example, here's an example. One thing is that I do want to leave this job. Um, I don't want to leave here, on, leaving a bad taste in anybody's mouth. If
mhm.
I'm not doing my job, if I could just slack off and get myself fired and make sure that that's the end of this opportunity. I can, I could do that, but I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave on those terms.
Right.
So in the meantime, I'm doing whatever I need to do to, just maintain a good name, I guess you'd say.
Mm,
Um, and so when something else comes up, then I can leave on good terms and whatever.
excellent.
So I think, what can we suggest as our homework for today? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So the homework that I have in mind for you,
Mm-hmm.
our listeners, our viewers, is to stop, make a practice of stopping where you are on the journey that you're engaged in. That you don't wait until you pass that 10-mile mark, but you stop, make a practice of it, whether it be in the morning or at lunchtime or in the evening or when a certain bell goes off or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
identify kind of your cue for when you're going to stop and pay attention to the beauty that's around you.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that are making you laugh? What are the things that are making you cry? And what are you going to do in response to what you find in that moment?
Mm-hmm. I have a friend who's going through cancer right
Mm,
now. She was diagnosed with cancer stage 3. Um, and she's having it. She was, even before that, she was struggling with depression and anxiety and stuff like that. And she's having a hard time. Um, she's having a hard time dealing with it. But what's weird is the last time I talked with her, she said she feels like the depression has alleviated
mm,
slightly. Um, and she doesn't feel as much pressure in that direction. But now I think it's because she's not reminding herself of that. Now she's reminding herself of the cancer, and she's dealing with that stuff now.
right.
So um, uh, I think what's important is taking the time to take care of herself, not just physically, but definitely physically,
Hmm.
but enjoying the fact that she has the opportunity to take care of herself right now.
Yeah. I just found out my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, has cancer. He's in the hospital right now.
Oh,
Uh, Just found out, I think Tuesday, that he has cancer. And
how's he handling it?
well, I don't know how he's handling it. I've been talking to my sister, and I know it's. I mean, you just hearing that you've got cancer, even hearing that you possibly might have cancer. I know when
Hmm.
I've experienced that in my own life, and as well as in my wife's life, Martha's life, that it just kind of it's a major wake up call. It's like, oh wow, how do I respond to this? How do I deal with this? And for both
Yeah.
of us, fortunately, it turned out to not even be cancer. So I can't imagine what it would be like to be told that it is cancer, not that it isn't.
Right.
So I imagine it's a bit of a deer in the headlights moment for them right now. It's all very new to them, and they're just
Yeah.
trying to figure out how do we deal with this. And I think right now there's probably lots of tears being shed. But I also imagine and hope, that they just really appreciate each other and are just really there for each other. And the community that they have both built around themselves is there for them.
I think as we see life in chapters, when you whatever chapter you're in, um, how are you going to close up this chapter?
Yeah. Close this
Um,
chapter and start the next
exactly.
chapter.
What are your possibilities of how is this chapter going to close? If you're talking about cancer, then you don't know how it's going to end. You don't know if you're going to if the next chapter is going to be how you beat cancer, or if the next chapter is going to be your loved ones talking about you because you didn't.
Right.
You never know. So in the meantime, what are you going to do during this chapter? You know, um, you can kind of sit in it and mope about it and all that. And I'm not saying you should, be happy and jolly, throughout the whole process and just ignore the fact that you have cancer,
Right.
but you could sit and do that and remind yourself how depressing it is and all that kind of stuff and how scary it is. And, or you could think about, the next, no matter what the next chapter is going to be, how do I want to leave this? So for me, I'd take the opportunity to wrap up loose ends,
Mm-hmm.
that way, no matter how this story goes, if I beat this cancer, then all my loose ends are tied up, and then my life, and then there's the awakening that you talked about, and you realize how precious life is and all that kind of stuff. Or if you don't beat cancer, then you're leaving things in a good place,
Right.
you know. So for me, um that's the thought. Those are the thoughts that come to my mind in
Yeah.
that situation.
And I'm thinking, just kind of like the homework just a moment ago,
Mm-hmm.
that, stop, notice where you are, look for
Mm-hmm.
what, is making you laugh or making you cry, and then, make appropriate decisions
Right.
as to what actions you're going to take to, come to the best conclusion that you can.
Mm-hmm. My intention for each moment is to make the following moments better.
Yes,
So what can I do right now in the next moment, or that's going to make the next moment better?
absolutely.
I could start a fight. If I'm in one of those moods, I could pick a fight. What's the next moment going to look like though? Do I really want to deal with that?
Right. Well, we wish our audience that you can find the beauty in the moment that you're in, whether it's making you laugh, making you cry, or just making you wonder,
Mm-hmm.
that and that the next moment that you step into is even more precious.
You own this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the past you can look at any way you want. The future you can decide. You can decide which direction it's going to go in. Um, but you have to make that decision right now in this moment.
Absolutely.